All right, so today we are going to start bowls. So today we're going to throw them, and then next class we are going to trim them. And it's where the trimming demonstration for the cups went very fast. The trimming for the bowls will just go into more detail, and the way we trim bowls is a lot the same way. So let's talk about, there's just a few different kinds. We're going to throw two different kinds of bowls, right? We're going to throw one that's a flat bottom bowl, and this flat bottom bowl starts off a lot like our regular cylinders, right? Because we're trying to, when we're doing cylinders making cups, we're kind of mostly making the bottom flat across the bottom, except this cylinder is going to be wider and flared out a little bit. So, because that's going to make a bowl. And then, so when you go home tonight and are eating out of a bowl or look in your cupboards at your favorite bowls, you think about how wide is this? How tall is this? What angle does this have? Right? And because just like cups, bowls have different usages, right? We use them for different things. Soup bowl versus like ice cream bowl versus cereal bowl. Some bowls are like really good, like all-arounder shapes. You can kind of almost eat anything out of them, spaghetti or whatever. Some are very specific, right? That you would only use this for certain kinds of food. Bowls that would hold liquids, like a soup or stew or something, would be different than like maybe a spaghetti bowl or something that has more of a pile in the middle, right, where the stuff isn't as liquidy or kind of dry. Or like you can think of like a rice bowl, right, has a very particular shape, or if you make it bigger and flare it out more, it could be more like a ramen bowl, right? And those bowls though can have curved bottoms and like that. So you see, this is the other kind of bowl that we're gonna throw, where we have this almost a continuous curve all the way around, right? And that's a slightly different kind of bowl as well. So if you look at the difference between the two, they can be the same width, they can change the height, right? But one has a flat bottom, one has a round bottom, and there's an infinite kind of spectrum between the two. So think about what kind of bowl that you want to make, right? And that's what we'll start talking about today. All right, so in general, we want to start with a bigger piece of clay than we did for our cups. So I'm starting off with a little bit more, like 2 or 2.5 pounds or 3 pounds or something, right? So, and that means that it's going to be harder to throw. What I mean by that, it's going to be harder to center, harder to open. Also, in general, our wheel speed, we need to lower our wheel speed a little bit, because this clay is going to be harder to center, and it's going to want to muscle us around more, so we have to bear down on it harder and longer. It takes longer for us to center this guy. So slow down your wheel speed a little bit. It's a bigger piece of clay. Also, since we're going to be throwing this out wider, right, the force at the edge of the circle, as you expand the circle of a spinning thing, right, gets much more dramatic. So think about like when you are on a merry-go-round, right, and your big brother or the crazy bully kid, right, you're on there and he gets on there and he tries to spin you fast to spin you off, right? If you're in the middle of the merry-go-round, the very center, right, you're happy, you're just spinning around, but as you get out to the edge, you want to fly off, right? Same thing with this, right? If it's a small, narrow object when you're throwing, the wheel speed can be a little bit faster. And then when you get out further, you have to slow your wheel speed down, because that outward force from the spinning gets more dramatic. That makes sense, everybody? All right, so same rule as before, we just make this into a round kind of blob, roundish circle. So this is slightly more clay than what I would use for a cup. Now, it says on the handout, you want your rim, you want all the same things. So interior looking good, a trim foot. They want to be about 6 inches wide at the rim. So I'm not going to measure, but it needs to have some width to it, right? So, and then the weight, we'll talk about that, and even wall thickness. And then don't worry about the slip decoration stuff. We'll talk about that later. All right, so here we go. So ready to go? I slap it down. So because this is going to be a slightly bigger piece of clay, I want to take some time to kind of like that, to slap it and try to get it mostly centered. If I toss it down, it was way out here, right? Sometimes we do that. I would just peel that bait off and then try to get it more into the middle. I don't have to actually slap it down. I can just place it there and just spend some time whacking it down like this. And that will get it to stick in, right? So you see, if I spend some time slapping it like that with these rounded hands, it gets pretty centered already. Ooh, that's good, right? And then I'll get my water and I'll just wet it down, push down a little bit. So since this is a slightly bigger piece of clay and I want this to be a wider thing, this mound will end up being wider too. So here, trying to center, squeeze and go up. Slow your wheel speed down, right? So this will require you to be steady for longer, right? So you have to go, I'll go up maybe one more time. So we're just working on centering, going slow and centering it up. That's looking pretty groovy. And then I go back down just like how we did normally. It's just gonna, every little step is just gonna take a little bit longer. I have to hold still. So that's already feeling pretty centered. So maybe we'll go up one more time. Here we go, up. And also when you use more clay will come off on your hands. It may take you longer to center the whole thing in general. All right, so we're feeling pretty centered. All right, so now I have to think about the type of shape or thing that I want to make in the end. So if I want to make a bowl like this, you see that this wide part, if I want to make a flat bottom bowl, that the flat bottom part can't be wider than the initial clay was, right? From here to here, the width of this clay piece, right, determines how flat this area can be. So the flat area on the interior has to be smaller than the width of the overall clay. So if you want a wide flat bottom, like a pie plate or something, you have to mash this out pretty far. That makes, so a pie plate has a wide flat area and a short rim, and it's still a bowl, right? You can see how if I just kept making this wider, it would have been a pie platey thing, or narrow. So think about that, how wide you want this area. This area needs to be wider than that. So let's just smash it out a little bit further, right? So let's smush down just a little. Oh, that's pretty good. You see how it squirted out? I made it a little bit wider, and then I'm happy with that. So this is gonna be a wide, flat bottom bowl, right? So this is pretty wide, and that's gonna be fine because I'm gonna make it, and then I'm already thinking my vision about what I want it to be, right? So this wide, and I'm gonna have these sides that come out like that, right? From the sides like that. So good. So then I do what we would normally do, and remember, since I'm dealing with more clay, I'll take it easy here. I can go a little bit slower. I curl my finger over, and I go down, 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 down. I wanna stop. I'm going to check my depth, just like we were doing with our cylinders and our cups. Oh, that's a little bit thick, right? Oh, that's actually not too bad. We'll leave it a little bit thick today. So here, now I'm going to create a flat bottom. So I'm going to curl my finger and pull straight back, just like we do with our cylinders again. I'm being super watchful of this, though, making sure that this is flat, right? So I'm being super, super duper. Oh, you see how it's already peaking there in the middle? Oh no, I'm not making it flat. See, it's high, low, high, low. So before I stretch this out, I'm gonna take care of that by pushing that back down and smushing it back in. Before I get out too far, I wanna make this started off flat, started off good. So I'm gonna check the height again because I'm worried maybe it's too thick here or something. Oh, it's looking okay. So here I'm just now gonna pull straight back here, keeping an eye on this interior section. There we go, feeling pretty good. So I'm trying to make that flat. Okay, so I pulled it out to there, right? Now it's a little bit high in here still, so we're gonna take some time to make sure this gets flattened. So we'll do this technique again, right, where we take our 3 fingers here on my right hand, make them flat, hold on to my sponge like that, and then I am going to work the clay right here, right? I'm gonna hold the thing like that and just push this down because the interior of the bowls is super important because they're exposed like all to the world, right? This is the business surface you'll be eating off of and scooping ice cream out of and all that. So I wanna take this 3 fingers and I work it on this side of the clay, right? This side of the clay that's spinning away. I wanna make that as flat as I can and happy for this flat bottom bowl, right? So I'm spending some time cleaning this part up, right? Making from there out super smooth and flat. So I can also do that with a rib here. So any of these ribs will work. And now that I kind of mostly smooth it, I can take this part of the rib and just hold it down. Now, if it were a bigger flat bottom bowl, right, I could use this whole rib flat like that. But you see how this part of the rib is past the center? If I apply pressure down with the rib in this direction, it will dig in and start plowing down into the clay. It'll dig out a furrow furrow. I don't want that, right? I can only work on the side from the middle out. So I'll use the curved side because I can direct the curved side where it's touching, right? So I'll do that. And so here I'll just spend some time doing that. So let's do it from that view. See how I'm using that like that as I come out from the middle. It's already pretty flat. I'm just spending some time really flattening it out. Because if you look at this, right, what is this really? I sometimes think about it, is it has this beautiful curve, and then you look at my finger, you see how tight my curve of my finger is, right? So my finger, no matter if I'm pushing down, always leaves like a finger furrow, right? Kind of a finger mark, a swirly mark, even though I'm trying to be careful. This is as if my finger was that big, right? And I'm allowing to really flatten out my finger, make a really big curve so that I'm able to do this and move it back and forth, and it makes a very wide, gentle, flat area, which is really good. So I'm not applying a lot of pressure here. I'm just spending some time. All right, so now I'm ready to start throwing the cylinder. So I'm doing air quotes for the cylinder. Why? Because when I throw this cylinder, I'm actually not going to throw a cylinder. I'm going to throw this thing so it's flaring outwards already, like straight out. So instead of straight up and down like we were doing before, I'm going to flare out. So I wet the inside and outside. Oh, itchy nose a little bit. So wet the inside and outside. So when I throw, I'm going to do exactly. So when I'm doing vertical, I'm like this. All right, I go squish and I go up when I'm doing a cylinder. So now what I do is I want to flare it outward. So I take this whole operation, same hand position, and I tip it down like that. You guys see that? So same thing, going up, same position, boop, just flipped over, and then I go out, right? Does that make sense? So it's the same hand position this way, same hand position that way. So I'm gonna do it one more time, and then I'm gonna squeeze, and then I'm gonna push out. So this does require a little bit more pressure from the inside fingers, right? Because I'm changing it to flare outward. So so you see how it's already starting to flare out. You guys see that? That's what we want, because we could try to throw it as a cylinder and then stretch it out into a bowl, but that's a lot of work. So it's already starting to be bowl-like already. That's what we would love to see, is the start of a bowl here. So I'll wet this down, and I'll squeeze here again. And what I'm looking for is evenness from rim to down here. Now it does get usually a little bit thicker down here, so I can push a little bit harder to thin out this part of the wall, but I want an even thickness wall from here down, ideally. So I'm pushing a lot from the inside right here. I'm pushing in along the floor, right? The direction along the floor, because I've already made a flat plane here, right? So I'm pushing out directly against that to keep extending that flame, and I'm going to thin out this wall here. So here we go. Pushing out here along the floor, and then flaring out. So I'm flaring and I'm going up and out, letting it go up and out. I really relax the pressure up here, right there. So you see how the bowl is starting to form? I'm slowly forming it outward. So here we'll go again with the inside and outside down again. Raise it up a little. Right there. So there, and I'll do it maybe one more time. So the wheel speed should be not too fast for this, right? Because this keeps getting wider and wider and wider. So you don't want to be super fast, because if I go super fast, the whole bowl is going to go whoop and just flare out on its own, which we don't want to do. You want to be the one controlling how much it flares. So I'll do one more time like this, squeeze, and I go up. I'm just using my fingertips. Oh yeah, there we go. I'm really letting up the pressure here, right? Because it's so easy to thin out this last part. Okay, so now let's take a look at what we have, right? So I have my bowl started, right? And look what we have. So let's start from the inside. It's pretty flat in here, and there's some finger swirly marks, right? Because I was pushing out down here, right? So I haven't had a chance to fix that. And then now if we look, right, it's about an even thickness, the wall heading down here. You guys see that? That's what I love to see. It's okay if it's thicker down at the base. So let's look at the flare, right? So now we're really going to concentrate on the overall form of the bowl. So I could do some shaping with my hands, but right, what we're going to do is keep using the rib to make this look good now. So here, I'm going to use this part of the rib, the curvature part. And what I'm going to do is pretend this is my bowl here. I'm going to use the rib, and I'll start at the rim and push down and travel downward to help make the shape like that. Go down, and then I'll come back in with this part of the rib, and from the middle out, kind of make sure I get rid of the finger marks that I put into this space here. So here we go. So here I'm going to use the rib like this and just push out from the inside like that. And this scrapes off all the goopy clay too. You see that? And then let's get a side view. Let's get a good side view shot like that. Oh, because you can see how the shape is starting to change, right? So why isn't that staying up? Stay up, please. Let's go down more. All right, so there, so you'll see it that when I push down here, I'm gonna push out with this rib right here, and I'm pushing out from the inside on the side that's spinning away. See that, how I'm pushing it outward? There we go. So now this part of it in here is looking really good, and then you can see how I'm starting to establish that curve. I want a nice, beautiful curve. Let me get rid of some of this water here that's on the inside. So there's lots of water here still. I'm gonna just use my sponge and clean that up. That helps remove some of those throwing lines that are here at the edge. So to get rid of those now, after I clean up the water, is I'll use my rib here and just go slowly into that curve there, right? So what am I doing here is I'm using this part and I'm going slowly into that right there. You guys see that, how that rib will smooth out the inside. So here, I go from here outward, like that. Oh, that's starting to look really beautiful, because for me, what's really important is how much care, love and care I take from making this part really beautiful. How this flat part of the bowl comes into that transition and swoops up into that curve, right? I would love it. So now when you go home, look at the curvature of the bowl. How is the form, right? Because I could really belly this out, right? I could leave it really straight. So this bowl, right, I left really straight, right? If you look at this, this is pretty, this wall here is pretty flat, and then it goes, just curves right into that. But I could have also pushed it out down here and give it a little bit more belly, how it swoops up, right? So when you look at your bowls at home, look at the curve. How does the curves transition into each other? Right, so now we'll just push it out, because I'm not that excited about this farm. I wish it had a little bit more belly, so let's just belly it out a little bit so you guys can see that a little bit more. Right, so here we go. So I'm just gonna belly it out just right here, right where I think, by pushing with this part of the curve right on the opposite side, right there. So here we go. Just using this side of this curve, I'm going to put, so if you look at this curve right here, it already has kind of the shape that I want, the belly. So I'll push down there, and I'm just pushing opposite inside to give it a little bit more belly down there. Right, I'm not necessarily trying to move the rim. I think the rim is in a pretty good spot right now. Oh, like that for me is like really good. Like, I love that little oofiness, that turn right there. So now, am I taking one last good look around at the entire thing? It's looking pretty good, looking pretty good, looking pretty good. Let's now get ready to finish it off. So always, like always, we're gonna cut the rim off if it's not so good. Like, this rim's pretty good. I probably wouldn't need to cut it off, but let's cut it off anyway. So remember, we do it like before, right? Sometimes I can do it this way, and I can bring it in just like the outside. But you see this, sometimes this, your splash pin and all that gets in the way. But so sometimes I do it lefty, where I'll hold it with my left hand and cut from the inside. Because since this rim has been folded outward, it's easier for me to come in from the lefty, right? And I'll hold it like a pencil in my left hand, and I'll come in. We'll do the other one righty on the next bowl. Right, so I cut off the rim super gently. So this is where being left-handed, I have an advantage, right? Because I know how to do that with my left hand. So, and we'll do the next one righty. So now that rim is really dry, I always wet it down again, right? So that, and then I'll hit it with the chamois. Right, so I have my wet chamois and I make it like a U shape, like, right? And I want my left hand on the inside, my right hand on the outside, and I just push it down a little bit, very gently, and use time, right, to, whoa, I'm being a little bit too aggressive. Just let it spin and let it become a round, nice, happy, oh, that's so good, right? Sometimes I have to clean up the sides a little bit. So if you look now, right, that rim is nice, round, and super happy looking. And then what do we do next? We're gonna have to undercut. So sometimes this undercut is really tricky because I don't have much space to try to get this guy under, right? You see that as I get this tool under, there's not much space here for me to really get in there and cut this off. So sometimes what I do is, what we'll do is we'll just take this tool and slide just the tip in like that underneath. So rather than actually trying to undercut and remove clay, I'm just going to hold this tip flat against the wheel while the wheel is spinning and insert that tip underneath like that as the wheel is spinning. So here we go, like that. You see that? And I just go in like that, and I use that to undercut. I'm not trying to remove clay, but I am trying to create that groove under there. Will it focus? Right, as it's spinning, I am just trying to stick it in there to create that undercut right there. So then that makes it easier for my wire tool to get under there, right? So I'm not trying to remove that much clay from that. If you can't get in there, you see how that's really tight. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna wire it off. Now, a couple tricks, right, about how do we get this thing off, right? Because remember before we were doing that lift off technique where we're using our hands, right, to lift off. But you see how wide and flat this is? That's not going to work, because what's gonna happen is gonna taco in half. So what we can do is get a board. We'll show you a couple new techniques about how to remove these things. I have my handy dandy board here, and what we're gonna do is use these pot lifters today. So these are what we call pot lifters. They come in pairs. They look like this. If I can get them on screen like that, you see that? And they are right over there by the needle tools. And what we'll do is I'll show you how they work. So what you do is you need to get them wet first, completely wet. Pot lifters, you need to get them wet. These surfaces here, wet, wet, wet. Wet, wet, wet. So if I had a bigger bucket, I would have just dunked them into the bucket, right? So what's going to happen is pretend my pot's here already. Pretend this is the bat. This is my pot. What I'm going to do is I'm going to set this down on the wheel head and scoot under my pot, right? So my pot's here in the middle, and then I'll lift them up. Woo, and then I'll set it down on my board and whoop, pull it out, right? So this round edges, see how these edges capture the edges of your foot around the bottom against the bat, and that allows you to lift your pot up. So let's do it together right here. Let's do it. I got to get it so you guys can see the whole process, or else. Yeah, so watch this. So I have those surfaces wet. That's really key to get these surfaces wet, or else these won't slide out. And then I put it down flat against the bat. I slide it under. You see that? So it's underneath all the way around on both sides. And then I want to lift these guys off flat, bring it over to the board, whoop, pull them out. There, you see that? So it's off and it's supported. And then I put it on the edge of my bat here, on the edge of my board, bloop, like that. And I slide them out. Very simple and happy. Right, so that's technique number one, pot lifters. We have 3 pairs of these. They're over there by the needle tools. When you're done, wash them and put them back. All right, so that's number 1. Let's do a round bottom bowl. So I don't have to clean this off, right? This is just clay that's stuck onto the bat. I can just slap a new piece of clay on. Let's cut this piece of clay down to a little bit smaller size. Make it nice and round and happy, bam. Right, so we'll go through the centering process a little faster on this one. Tighten that down a little. Just get my camera angle right, so here we go. So this will be a round bottom bowl. So let me get it centered up first, and then we'll talk about what that is here in a second. All right, so I got my centered mass, right? Let me push this down. So this centered mass, so I started off with a little bit less clay. And what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna go down and open, right? So let's go down and open, blah, 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 opening, right? And then I'll stop and let's measure thickness. Where did my needle tool go? I just had it, there we go. Right, measure thickness, bloop, and then I measure my thickness, that's okay. Pinky width thickness, that's good, perfect. So now this is where this is gonna be different, right? You see that that's there, that's the thinnest part, and then as I open, instead of opening flat, I'm gonna pull up. I'm gonna leave more clay behind and I'm basically rising up, right? So this part of the clay right here in the middle is the thinnest. And as I bring this back, I leave more clay, more clay, more clay behind. So as I get out to the edge, it'll become thicker. That makes sense? So that creates this nice rounded bottom. So here I go back in and then I'm gonna raise up as I go back. It's gonna feel a little strange if you haven't done this before. So I'm slowly raising up as I go back in space, right? So it's kind of hard to see, but there, and then I'm raising up there. I'll make it more exaggerated here. How about that? We'll make it super exaggerated as they go out. Right, so you can see how that is more, that's the lowest and that's raising up. So you're establishing already the curve, the part, the way the bowl is gonna look. You can change this a little bit, but really once you start raising your walls up, it's hard to change this, but I can still change it now. So I kind of change it the same way I was doing it before, right? We take our fingers, but I don't have to have them flat. I can have this middle one out a little bit. You see that? I do that, and then I could start kind of rolling this up and down a little bit as we do this. So here, I'll just do, let me clean this up so maybe you guys can see it, right? So a little better. See slowest, and then you see how my finger rises up. This is actually, curve is looking good, so I'm gonna clean it up a little bit by spending some time with this, just trying to smooth it out a little, right? Because it looked kind of finger marky. There we go. So you see that now, that's looking better. I'll come back and fix that in a minute. Fix it up a little bit better. So now when I throw this, this is really much higher. So I am gonna throw here a little bit higher, but the same deal. I'm gonna throw up and out like we did the other bowl, but mainly I'm gonna try to push this side in. I'm not gonna try to push this side from the inside out. Push, and I rise up. You see that? Slowly, and I'm flaring it outward. I'm gonna round this off because that got a little bit funky. Wet everything down again. Push in mainly. Then flare out. There we go. So these bowls in general, for me, stand up higher for the same amount of clay, right? Because the other one has so much time that it just goes flat and then rises. These ones ends up taller, right? So you can think what kind of bowl, like a rice bowl, ramen bowl, that sort of thing, right? Has those very curved walls, right? And then, but for you, you have to think about what food would you eat out of this. So if you're not interested in this sort of food that would work out of a bowl like this, then you don't have to make one. In general, also, these bowls have narrower feet, right? Where this bowl here is going to have a really wide foot, right? So these are generally, these flat bottom bowls are more stable. These rounded bottom bowls can have a smaller foot, so they're a little bit more tippy, but they look just gorgeous, right? So let's look at the overall shape. You see that right there, right? And then let's look at the inside really fast. Oh, that's looking really good. All right, so I'm pretty happy with that shape, the way it's looking right now. So I am going to clean it, just start working it a little bit as far as cleaning it up. So take my sponge and just sponge out the water from the inside so I can get a good look at it. So now, here we go. So remember before for these bowls, I'm gonna take my rib here and just start at the top and go down the edge like that and go all the way to the middle. See that? And I may stretch out this part a little bit, meaning fold this side down a little. So let's do that. Here, if we can get that to look good. Come on. Let's go up a little bit. There we go. So here, right? So we'll start here and then go down like that, all the way down. So here I'm pushing out a little bit and I'm using this rib to go all the way down to the middle. You should watch your wheel speed go kind of slow, right? Don't go super fast. So here I'm working the middle. Now, one thing that you will notice if you make these is that when you're pushing out here above this where the clay base is, that clay is really wobbly, right? Whoop, 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 whoop. Will change form really easily because there's no clay supported. So when I push this upper part out, it moves pretty quickly, pretty easily. But when I get down here and I push way down here at the bottom where the clay is supported, I actually have to push much harder to change that curve. That makes sense? So I push pretty lightly up here to change the curve, push pretty lightly, push pretty lightly, push pretty lightly, push pretty lightly. And then when I get here, right, I'm into the place where I'm supported by the clay. I feel it. Now I have to push a lot harder to get even the change a little bit, right? And I go all the way to the middle. Ooh, this is looking good. Now, one thing that you'll notice is that I'm actually really not looking at the outside curve for any time I make a bowl. I'm always looking at the inside. How does the inside look? What am I going to eat out of it? Does it work good, right? Is it going to function as what I want it to do, right? I will work on the outside when we trim it. So here, I'm just watching the inside as I go down, and this goes for all bowls, right? I'm just looking at the inside, getting the inside looking as awesomeness as I want, right? So that's looking pretty good. I'm pretty excited. I'm thinking that's gonna be an awesome, that's Christmas presents right there, right? That is an awesome bowl. Now this has what I would call kind of a pointy bottom, right? You see how narrow and tight it kind of curves, and this has a very narrow bottom. So that's like a rice bowl has a very pointy bottom. Why? A Japanese rice bowl is because they're using chopsticks. Chopsticks aren't very good at scooping up things. So the Japanese rice bowls have a very narrow circumference bottom, very tight, because that allows you to kind of sweep the rice, the little bit of rice that's left, into the middle, and then you can kind of scoop it up. Using a flat bottom bowl like this for a rice bowl sucks, because you're really just pushing them around all day. So that's why. So narrow bottom bowls do have a purpose, right? So that circumference there in the middle is very small, like the tightness of the curve. So I'm going to use my finger and kind of fix that right there. So that's feeling pretty good. So for this bowl, we'll cut off the rim again, right? So I'll go more from the outside here. Come on, get down, get right. There we go. So here I'll just use this time from the outside like this, slice off. Like that, and I slice all the way through and I lift off, right? And then I'm gonna do the same thing again. I'm gonna wet it down, and then I'm going to use my chamois, chamois to round it off, make it all beautiful, happy. Now, this bowl has you see how this bowl is much taller than the other one, right? There's a lot more vertical space, so I will be able to undercut this one. Right, so this one, and so why is this important? This really makes my trimming experience go a lot faster and a lot easier, right? Trimming is slow and hard to do sometimes. This really lessens the amount of clay I will be needing to trim off. Trimming is lots of fun, but I want to get through that experience, right? So by removing all this clay is clay that I don't have to trim off later. We do that. Now, also, that base is much narrower. So let's talk about maybe one more way we can remove. So last time we did pot grabbers, right? Right. This time we're gonna do this technique where we try to float it off, right? So here, let me get this bat back in play here. I need to get this bat nearby. We'll back this guy off. Let me see if I can even do that here. I can. All right, so here I haven't wired it off yet, but what I'm gonna do is add lots of water off, right? Lots of water on here, right? So I'm squeezing water onto my bat, lots of water, right? All the way around. See how it's mostly surrounded? Then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my wire tool and cut it water underneath my pot, okay? So slice. Ooh, you see how it's already wanting to slide. So why is that, right? Because as I'm slicing, the wire is drawing the water with it, right? So now this guy is slidey around slidey, right? You see that? Now I can get it off by getting a board. You see, like I have my board. I want to apply lots of water onto my board too. Right, so let me get my board here, blah, 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 blah. So lots of water, right? You see how much water on my board. I want it like goopy drippy. I'm gonna turn this around. So then what I wanna do is hold my board below the level of my, I have to do it this way, below the level of where my bat is. You see that? So I want this to be higher, this to be a little bit lower. Right, and then so since this is ready to slide off and this is really wet, this board is really wet, it should just slide right onto the board as long as this board is a smidge lower. So for most of you guys, you would want to remove your splash pan. This particular guy, I can't remove the splash pan without removing the wheel. So then I just slide this baby off. Bloop, 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 bloop. Oop, must be a little bit higher. There we go. There, right? You see that, how that's a slider? I just slid that baby off, and now what do I have? I have both my bowls onto one board, right? You see that? So now what can I do? I want to take my sponge and kind of patrol up the excess water around the edge, right? And I could have done that with this one. I could have slid this one, but I pot lifted, or I could have pot lifted either one or both of them. Now, pot lifting is a lot faster, right? A lot easier and everything, but you may not have pot lifters or later, right? So we do a slide technique. Now, you can also keep it on these bats, but we don't have that many bats, right? So let's say you slice it off and you end up with something big, right? You wire it off, make sure you always wire it, but then you can also leave it on the bats, right? Too. If you're gonna do that, maybe start with a green one. And then what you could do is you could potentially just leave it on the bat till it's leather hard. That makes sense? But we don't have a lot of these bats. So boards, we have a lot of, right? Wear boards to put them on. So any questions about that? You're supposed to make 5 of these. This is the last. Supposed to make 5 bowls. They all have to have a bigger than 6 inches. The other requirements are on the handout. Don't worry about the decorative part because we haven't covered that yet. Right? So for the bowls that you start making, they don't need to have any of those decoration parts. That makes sense? Any questions? All right, let's make some bowls.